Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 28th, and the time is 6:30 p.m., and I would like to call this regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Copeland.
Here.
Webb.
Here.
Stagel.
Here.
Onken.
Here.
Caliphate. Hauk.
Yeah, here.
Serrata.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you. Next on the agenda, consider approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission October 14th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. We need a motion and a second to take action.
Motion to,
Go ahead.
motion to approve?
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Commissioner Copeland and a second from Commissioner Hauk. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, we've got minutes passed. Next, we have the citizen comment period. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comments from citizens early in the agenda of regular meetings. Speakers are provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other matter concerning city business, and they must observe the 3-minute time limit. I have one form already from Ms. Lila Knight, if you would like to come forward and speak.
My name is Lila Knight, and I'm here to enthusiastically support agenda item number 2 on consent. I'm certain that you will. But I just wanted to speak out because my neighbor has been working so diligently to build a new house. And we have only like 4 houses on an entire city block. And right now, I'm the only person living on the block, and I want my neighbors back. So I'm hoping you'll feel sorry for me because I'm elderly and, I could fall. Okay, so please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak during citizen comments? Okay, I'll go ahead and close citizen comments. Next, we have the consent agenda. Consider approval of a proposed replats of lots 1 through 6. This is Block 43 of original Town of Kyle, located at 205 North Groose Street. Did I say that right? Groose? What? Gross. Oh, yeah. We need a motion and a second to take action on this.
Motion to approve? Second.
Okay, motion to approve from Commissioner Copeland and a second from Commissioner Webb. Is there any discussion on this one? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that is approved. Next, we have consider and possible action. Consider approval of a conditional use permit regarding building elevations for a proposed Breaks Plus in accordance with section 53-892. Districts and boundaries, subsections A5, the FM 1626 Conditional Use Overlay District for property located at 4580 South FM 1626. This is CUP-25-0143. Mr. Lutz.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Good evening. So again, the applicant's looking to develop a new Breaks Plus automotive repair shop. The proposed structure is approximately 5,000 square feet, just shy. This site is 0.89 acres. It is in the Plum Creek zoning district. This is the PUD MXD zoning. It is within the FM 1626 overlay district. That's why we're seeing this tonight. The primary access for this site is off of Wittenberg, and the secondary access is off Ratcliffe. In this image, Ratcliffe will be the street plan west. Here's the proposed site plan. So the associated site plan has been reviewed for compliance with city codes, found it to be satisfactory. Some highlights there: the parking requires 18, they're providing 24. They are allowed 80% impervious cover. They're sitting at about 75%. Their photometric plan showed the 0 light trespass 3 feet past the property line. So this is, again, an overlay. This is the building materials. They're looking at EFIS stone, concrete blocks. However, there are no masonry minimum requirements in this overlay. The Plum Creek Architectural Review Board has approved these elevations. And so when we look at the additional overlay standards, again, there are no prescribed standards in this overlay that is what you would find in the I-35 overlay. So very different. You have a little bit of discretion, but there's no standard set for those applicants to meet. So going through some of the elevations, this is the west elevation. It's about 50% EFIS, 20% stone, 20% block. Then you've got the storefront and the awnings. When you look at the east elevation, very similar. Your stone does go down a little bit, but they do have these segmented glass doors. That's a requirement you see in the I-35 overlay. They are applying that here. This is the north elevation. Again, about 32% EFIS, 14% stone, 43 at block, storefront awning. And then this is the south elevation. We looked at the landscape plan. Their minimum was 3,800 square feet. They're providing about 7,600 square feet. They're providing the accurate number of trees, and then they're exceeding on their shrubbery for enhanced landscaping. This is the landscaping plan. And so as always, your options tonight are to approve as presented, approve with conditions, or deny the proposed CUP. Staff is recommending option 1, approve as presented tonight. I'll be able to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant's representative is here also if you have additional questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff or the applicant at this time?
Question for staff. We may have a chance to discuss this regarding the Freeze and Nichols draft that is submitted, but I just want to bookmark this one. It's in 1626 overlay, and there are no standards for it. So what I would like at some point tonight is just to get my head around exactly what the process would be for Go Forth 1626 veterans to have standards. So just bookmark that.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. So this is right next to the Reliable Automotive. One of the things I notice, and I drive past that one every day, usually in the evenings and especially on the weekends, there's a significant overflow of cars that's usually, it almost always exceeds the number of parking spaces. They're stacked up along the, along the lane that kind of drives around the building, things like that. I know they have more parking spaces than are required, but if it's anything like the automotive business that's exactly like them right next door, I'm kind of concerned that they're going to have even more cars stack up in that area, and it's going to turn into quite a parking lot. Has that been discussed, or is there a plan in place to handle overflow like that?
No, generally, our code's kind of interesting. We have minimum requirements. We also do have some maximum requirements. So if it's a overflow issue, then that's something I need to probably sit and discuss with the owners, maybe possibly code enforcement, to talk about how do we alleviate that problem. It wouldn't be something where we would require additional parking, but if it is a safety issue and it's causing egress issues, then we'll have to address that. But that would probably be a separate conversation outside of tonight.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So along that same line, is there a maximum parking at this establishment?
Yes, I don't recall offhand what the maximum is.
But we're not close to it with this current plan.
Kayla, do you?
The maximum? As often as I can. The maximum's generally 1.5 times the minimum. So if you have the maximum, you do that. But typically, if you have 100, say you have 100 minimum parking spaces, 150 would be your maximum.
Yeah, they would have a 27 maximum one here. They're at about 24.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla.
Are there any other questions? Okay, y'all know the drill. We need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve?
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Vice Chair Stiegel and a second from Commissioner Copeland. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, that one's approved. Consider approval of a conditional use permit regarding building elevations in accordance with section 53-892, districts and boundaries, subsection A1, the I-35 conditional use overlay district for property located at 18775 IH 35. CUP-25-0133. Mr. Lutz.
Yes. Wait for the wizard in the back to bring up this item. So this applicant is developing a McDonald's restaurant. This is what we're calling the Windy Hill subdivision. The project is approximately 3,500 square feet. There is an outdoor seating area. It's approximately 2.6 acres. It's zoned retail services. The I-35 overlay does apply. Their secondary access is generally going to be limited to right in, right out on the Windy Hill side, as we do have some road bond improvements there that we're planning. Here you can see the site layout. This is the approximate lot shape on this tract. This is the proposed site plan, minus the landscaping. Apologize for that. So the associated site plan has reviewed for compliance. City staff did approve that. The parking required here is 37. They're providing 42. The impervious covers allowed is 80%. They're sitting at about 56. Again, photometric plan was in accordance with city regs. And when we looked at the building materials, it's brick, limestone, wood look. These are aluminum battens, but they are modeled to look like wood, and then metal. So we did do the calculations. Their 90% masonry requirements are satisfied. So the additional overlay standards that you find in the I-35 generally requires discuss sidewalks from front door to building and different parking areas, and then additional plantings. Those requirements have been satisfied as well. So here are the material elevations. So this is the breakdown on the entire thing. This is the color palettes. And then kind of breakdown of the northwest elevation visually and the east and south. So when we looked at the landscaping requirements here, there's 0.26 acres required. They're providing 1.1. The trees required are 38. They are providing 24. However, we do have some alternative compliance in our code built in, so they're choosing to utilize that. So they are decreasing the number of trees that they're required to plant, but they are increasing the size of those trees that have to be planted at maturity. So right now, generally any tree that gets planted is a 2-inch caliper. They're looking to increase those to 4.5, so a little more established tree. And so that's why they get the reduction in the number of trees per code. So this is kind of the breakdown. Every 3 4.5 trees, they would get credit for 5 3-inch trees. And then on the 4.5 trees would be 21 plus the 3. So that's how you get that calculation. A little different. I don't know if we've had anybody do that since I've been here. I think this may be the first one. And then here's the landscaping plan showing those tree locations. Again, the 3 options for you tonight: approve as presented, approve with conditions, or deny. And staff is recommending option 1 at this time. I do not know if the applicant is here. Yes, applicant is here as well if you have questions for them, and I'll try to answer any I can as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
This plan has a rather long driveway to get into that structure, and that driveway goes along current vegetation. Is that vegetation going to be removed as part of the build-out, or does any of that get to remain?
Sorry, let me go back to the plan. I want to make sure I understand which.
Sure.
Could you go to the landscaping slide? I believe it was the second to last one. I can't go backwards for some reason. Oh, man, can I do that?
So right here, that driveway that looks to go kind of planned northeast-ish, that snakes around the gas station to connect to, is it Windy Hill?
Yes.
That driveway currently has some vegetation. Is that being removed as part of this build-out?
Yes, some of that will be removed. Some of that is some detention pond. They may have to do some work on that because of the additional runoff. So yes, they will do that. They aren't showing any additional plantings coming back, but it is going to be landscape. It's not going to be just clear cut. It will be grass, but it's not going to be a pavement or asphalt the whole way through.
Is there an option to add trees or shrubbery along that way to kind of increase the number of trees that come into closer compliance or with that reg, even knowing that the increased size helps to offset that?
That is within your purview. Landscaping is part of your review. If you feel that that's warranted, you can definitely make that as part of your motion. I don't know whether the applicant how will feel about that. I will let you know there is no sidewalk that will connect to that section, so it would be purely additional landscaping. I'll go ahead and turn it over. If you don't have any additional questions for me, I can bring the applicant up.
Along that same line, one more quick one. With that road bond construction plan, are there any sidewalks expected along that main road that we have a disconnect then between the building and future build-out?
I believe there are full sidewalks on Windy Hill that are being installed as part of the road bond, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Leslie Ford from Ofichito. My address is 1008 Macon Street, Fort Worth, Texas, and I am here in representing McDonald's. So, welcome any questions. It's a pretty straightforward site with the exception of kind of that flag lot. And so two things about the landscaping. I heard your question, Spencer, Mr. Copeland. So, sorry guys, I don't have my readers. I'm like,
you're fine.
I don't want to call you something wrong. But no, just two things about that. So first off, we've found that the larger the caliper of the tree, the more likely they are to survive in mass in Texas summer. And so that's part of the reason for the larger planting. Secondarily, the only issue I could potentially foresee with having to plant additional trees along that line is I don't know exactly, without looking at it with our engineering team, what kind of width we have. I don't think we'd be opposed to it, but just making sure that we're not encroaching on any other property lines, because as the trees grow and the roots get larger, then it becomes an issue and a nuisance thing in the future. And so that may have been the rationale behind kind of avoiding anything there, just because it is such a skinny piece. I think I don't know that we can go back, but maybe we can. We cannot. But if we go back to the overall site plan, we can kind of see like the flag lot that was ended up there. And so it's a really skinny piece of land. And so that's the only thing I would say is not opposed to it, just if it does in fact work, to make sure we're not encroaching on the additional properties and causing additional issues. Yeah, so you can kind of see that there's some stuff there. And so that would be the only thing. I think it may even be, there we go. Yeah, so you can really see like how it's flagged out there.
And so knowing that in the future that Windy Hill Road will have sidewalks connecting to that, is there any concern with adding in sidewalks to the driveway? I know currently it's not planned for that, but adding that in, potentially adding in vegetation, fully respecting that reasonable pushback of not making it too big to then cause issues on the root systems. Is that an option, or what am I blind to with that request?
I don't necessarily think it's not an option. I would say, would want to know, I know that there's some construction and some additional transportation plan for Windy Hill. I don't know what that is, and so there may be a right-of-way that we may, and maybe engineering can answer that, I don't know if they're here today, but what the future looks like for that. We may be not doing it because it may be something that is being torn out in the future and then they'll redo it. I don't know that for sure, though I cannot tell you. If for whatever reason it's not something like that, that's not a big deal for us. It's just making sure that we understand us not putting it in, the city having to come right behind us and tear it back out again and then put it back in again. So just understanding that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Copeland. I think you were talking about essentially sidewalks from what would be Windy Hill internal to your site.
Correct.
So you're right. I think the sidewalks along the roadway would be constructed as part of the city's road bond projects, but kind of essentially, how would you bring those pedestrians from Windy Hill to the site? And would there be enough room adjacent to the proposed driveway to go out on that, I think is the question. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are correct, with
Okay.
the intention of, and later in the agenda, we have our Friesen-Nichols report, and there's recommendations of increased foliage and shading of sidewalks. Wanted to find a way to advocate for increased pedestrian ingress to your facility in a way that's also shaded in alignment with what's probably going to be a future discussion topic.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd be opposed. It's just making sure, again, with engineering, how much room do we have to have enough car space versus to make like pedestrian safety, essentially. Do we want people like in a lane where the cars are right next to them? Probably not. I don't know how much room we have to work with, so it's kind of hard to see it here. I'd have to really So yes, not an issue, but with the caveat that if for whatever reason it doesn't work, we don't want to get into an issue where we say, let's add a sidewalk, but then we're now not compliant with the width of the lanes that we need to get you guys in and out. Because I think this will eventually, from my understanding, because there is the lot that is, I believe, planned south from us, eventually it will connect and that will all become the access point from Windy Hill. So it will come down there is what I'm understanding for future development. And so
Yeah, you're right. I do think that's to be shared ingress and egress from Windy Hill to kind of 3 commercial sites directly south of here between this and the hotel.
Yeah, and that would just be up to your engineering team, just to make sure, you know, with the load of the cars that are coming for those 3 uses, with the width that we have, does that work? And so I do not know that, and I cannot tell you that. I cannot say with confidence 100% yes, we can do that, just because I don't understand the engineering ramifications of it on spec right here.
And let me confirm what I just heard. This little strip in that blue is going to eventually service 2 other establishments, in theory, pending
Yes.
approvals. Okay. And so then the question to staff is there a way that we can recommend that this establishment look into those items without putting in that requirement? 'Cause I would hate to require something that is then technically engineering not feasible, and then there's a course correction down the road.
Yes, we've done similar motions. It's just with the caveat that, say you were to make a motion to approve with the condition that you add a sidewalk and street trees. The motion would just need to improve that should those not be physically viable options, that the plan would be approved as presented.
Thank you.
Yep.
And on that same vein, with the future construction coming down to Plan South there, one thing I would ask too is I know that because this is going to end up being a McDonald's owned piece of property, that we'll have to have a shared access agreement to get down to those additional pieces of property. It may also be a conversation of proportionality, just, you know, if there is expense when it pertains to the street trees and also the addition of the sidewalk, how much of that proportion would be McDonald's versus future development, just to make sure that we're carrying that through so that there's shared, since it's a shared access, there's shared responsibility and kind of shared feeling of that. Because I could see, especially with this being, I mean, a franchise model, the franchisee may not be the most big fan of having to keep up the trees by himself whenever others are kind of using his land as well. So I think that may be a conversation too. But again, we're getting into a lot of those semantics about what's allowed, what's not allowed.
Yeah, and a follow-up on that for staff-wise, I would say there is a lot of shared infrastructure on this site in general, the shared driveway, the shared detention, the shared access. So I would hope that those conversations would be something you, as the landowner, would have with the 3 tenants total for that. And I would, I don't think staff's gonna get involved with the proportionality of that, but I do think that's a fair conversation for you to have with kind of the larger subdivision improvements as a whole.
Okay, any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, motion time. Who wants to bring a motion?
Motion to approve with the request for increased sidewalks or establishment of sidewalks and increased vegetation along that street or the access road from Windy Hill Road, pending approval from city engineering staff to make sure it's technically feasible. If it's determined by staff not to be feasible, then it's approved as currently presented.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Copeland and a second from Commissioner Hauk. Do we all feel like we understand the motion, or do you want me to repackage it and say it again?
It seems to me that we could have a motion straight up for approval and then with an amendment, perhaps, of all the stipulations that were made.
I think as he said it is fine too. So I think because the motion is essentially to approve with the following conditions, and if the conditions can't be met based on staff recommendation, that the plan would be approved as is.
Okay.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. I have a question for Commissioner Copeland about this idea. I like the idea of having, sidewalks and street trees, accessibility. It is a very narrow point of entry there, and if we weren't able to get both sidewalks and trees, and we had to get one or the other, what do you think? I'd be curious what the commission thinks about what we prefer. Like, if we can't have everything we want, what do we want?
My personal preference would be sidewalks. Think about safety of pedestrians getting in. I'd love them to be cool while walking as well, but I'd rather them be safe over comfortable.
Yeah, I kind of agree with them on that. Keeping them away from I-35 as best we can is going to be good for everybody.
I agree, you gotta have a place for the pedestrians, first of all. So, sidewalk.
My mindset, I'm like, I rarely see pedestrians, and I can't imagine that many pedestrians will be walking to McDonald's. So I would go for trees, but I'm obviously outnumbered, so.
You took the words out of my mouth. I'm glad you said it, not me, but that's my thought as well. I think the trees, to me, would be the bigger priority.
I think we
but
get more value from
I
them,
think so.
but, all right.
I also respect that. I would hope that in a few years with the build out of the road bond, that this area will be more congested with people, with buildings, with infrastructure, and that I think you're correct today. I worry about 5-10 years from now, where that balance shifts.
And I understand where you're coming from, because there's two businesses that we don't know what they are in there yet. And so I can see why having some walkability in there would be important.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this matters, but there will be sidewalks connections. I mean, that person will have to hit up and then go down the frontage. So just if it matters, I don't know if it changes your thought process, but it's if this sidewalk were to not be there and was just street trees, it would not prevent pedestrians from finding their way to that location.
There's another access point.
Yes, they would come down the Windy Hill to the I-35 access road, and they're doing sidewalks along the frontage of their property as well. So if you see on this plan, it's just the small little section, but they are putting that along the access road as well.
I think that building something like that there is going to attract people walking down it, especially as Copeland said, when it builds out a little bit more, there's going to be people walking down that way, and they're going to walk along that road regardless. Having a sidewalk there is future-proof.
But will people use the sidewalk if it's 500 degrees?
That's more of a question for engineering, right? Putting up the shade and,
But I think staff, I am outnumbered here, so when y'all are having these discussions with the applicant, if we have to make a compromise between those, I think we don't have to put it in the motion, but it seems like the commission would be okay compromising for sidewalks.
Okay.
And I don't
We'll
know
work
if it's
with them.
helpful to just do sidewalks on one side, if that's more feasible, just options on the table.
Yeah, just looking at the width, you may be limited. It may not be both
Yeah.
sides of the street.
I would definitely think one side only on that as well. It is more of an internal driveway.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Again, the motion is to conditionally approve the conditional use permit if they add the sidewalks and trees. Otherwise, if they're not able to do that, it would be approved as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. Consider approval of a conditional use permit for a proposed retail shell building located at 827 Veterans Drive in the Rebel Drive Overlay District, CUP-25-1030. Ms. Sharp.
All right, good evening, Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. Get our presentation back up here in just a second. There we go. All right, so I have another CUP for you tonight. This one is in the Rebel Drive overlay. The applicant is seeking to develop the first of 5 buildings in the Parkton Square Retail Center. This building in particular will be a little over 26,000 square feet, and the proposed materials consist of stucco, brick, and metal cladding. Okay, this is the east elevation facing Veterans Drive. Just as a quick reminder, the Rebel Drive overlay is one of those overlay districts that doesn't have any specific building material requirements or anything like that, but the CUP is required. So this one, the primary materials are the brick and metal cladding and stucco. Here is the back side of the building facing away from Veterans Drive or FM 150. There is also a fence that will provide screening from the adjacent residential. And then here is the north elevation. This one's about 85% metal cladding with some stucco and wood detailing. And then the south elevation, this one's about 46% metal cladding and 54% wood. And then this is kind of that big, long building to the plan south on this site plan. So it'll be kind of back behind. There's two more retail buildings up front, in front of this building, and then the two to the left as well. Here is the landscape plan. This is just showing that there's going to be trees within 50 feet of every parking space as required by our code, and also some street trees and things like that. And then a more detailed landscape sheet for you. Staff has reviewed this request and has found the proposal to be compliant with the Rebel Drive overlay, the planned unit development zoning, and other applicable city codes, and we are recommending approval of this CUP as presented. Your options tonight are to approve as presented, approve with modifications, or deny the request. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, that back side of that, can you go back to the back side of that building again? You said there's a fence, but how high up is it gonna be? Because I'm gonna be real with you, that backside's kind of ugly. It's just a blank white wall.
I believe that the fence height is allowed up to 8 feet for commercial properties adjacent to residential.
Commissioner Hulk, I see your point there. I wonder if there's a way we can encourage artwork or other aesthetically pleasing additions on that. How does that interact with the overlay, and would that cause conflict?
It's definitely something you can ask. If we go back to, let's see, you can kind of see some of the lot lines for the adjacent residential properties back here. Even with the fence, if you were to do artwork or something like that, they would only see like the very top of it. So it wouldn't be very visible for anybody but those immediate residents back there, so.
That's my only concern really, is like the people who are gonna be backed up right against this building, you know, that bright white wall every time they look out their window, you know?
Yeah, there is some landscaping buffer, and then the fence. There's also parking and drive aisle as well behind that building.
Fair enough, thank you.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the building materials, please? Thanks.
For the rear facade.
That one's perfect right there. Oh, no, for the front, sorry about that.
Sorry.
You're good. While I'm looking at this, I had one quick question about, in the event that Veterans Drive expands, I'm assuming this has all been thought about before, but I just want to make sure before we vote. Is the setback far enough that it wouldn't cause any issues if we were to expand the road?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any issue there. They are doing some improvements to 150. If you drive through there now, you can see all the construction
Yeah.
going on. They're adding some turn lanes and things like that through there to help improve traffic flow. So, for the most part, that's already been accounted for, you know, say 30, 40 years from now, if they decide to expand, I don't know.
Oh, I'm not worried about that. But yeah, that's more what I was talking about. Okay.
Note to the fellow commissioners, this is another project in an overlay district that has no standards. Hopefully, we'll talk about that later.
That's why it's a brown metal building.
And with that planned expansion of veterans, Is it only vehicles? Are there plans for bike lanes, for sidewalks? What does that look like long-term? Do we know?
Long-term, not really right now. Let me see if I can get to the site plan real quick. There are sidewalks planned along Veterans Drive, and there is going to be that turn lane coming in here off of, I believe it's Romans Road. That's kind of bisecting the commercial properties there. But as far as we're aware at this point, that's kind of the extent of the plans for improvements on 150 at this moment.
In that Romans Road, that will connect to that recently approved subdivision for residential facilities, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got one question also on the rear elevation. Oftentimes, the structures that we see on the back of the buildings, there's electrical panels or doors for staff to go in and out, maybe take out trash. The west elevation here doesn't show any of that. Is it literally just a long blank wall, or will there be some doors and electrical panels and stuff back there?
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some doors and mechanical equipment back there. It's just not shown on here. Typically, when we have like the I-35 overlay and things, that requires more screening. That's typically when we're a little bit more strict about making sure those things are shown. But when there's not any specific standards within the overlay to require screening of those things, you end up seeing something like this. But there will be
Gotcha.
doors and mechanical equipment and things like that.
Okay, that's clear. That makes sense. Thank you. One last question, just to help my understanding of what I'm seeing. Could we go to the south elevation, please? Okay, so it looks like we have two different tones of brick here, but I'm wondering if that's shading. Is anyone able to clarify? Is that just the way the wall is shaped, or?
So there's no brick on this side. It's metal cladding and then wood. So you're probably just seeing the two different materials.
Okay. Yeah.
Michael Linehan, LSI. My firm's an architect and landscape architect for this development. So on this south facade, that's actually a recessed patio space. And so that entire facade is actually wood or a wood tone material. And then the roofing that you see behind that is the metal cladding.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate
And
that.
to answer the question about the back house wall, yes, there would be doors. Those aren't shown now because they're not planned in, because it is a shell building, so the tenants will decide where those eventually go.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, we would need a motion to take action on this item.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Commissioner Houck and a second from Commissioner Copeland. Is there any discussion on the motion? Well, I just want to say that I think that this is one of the better looking buildings we've seen. I appreciate the variation in windows from what we've typically seen. I like that there's changes in texture of the wall and some subtle variation in height, but it doesn't seem in your face and ostentatious. I think that this is actually a pretty nice looking spot, and yeah, I'm proud to vote yeah for that one. But
Yeah, well done.
all right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, we've got that one done. Consider and make a recommendation to the city council regarding a conditional use permit pursuant to section 53-899D of the City of Kyle Code of Ordinances to allow the sale or lease of golf carts within the I-35 overlay district on property located at 3080 Kyle Crossing, Unit 4, Kyle, Texas 78640. We do have a public hearing for this item, so I will go ahead and open that now at 7:10. Okay, seeing none, we will close it at 7:10. Ms. Sharp.
All right, good evening, Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. Tonight we have a actual conditional use permit for you to review. So this one is a conditional use permit to allow golf cart sales within the I-35 overlay. So this is a property kind of nestled between I-35 and Kyle Crossing, and the property is zoned warehouse. So just a little bit of history on this request. So the tenant has been operating at this location since around 2022 without a certificate of occupancy. They recently applied for a certificate of occupancy, at which time the planning department determined the use was not permitted per the I-35 overlay, and we then recommended that they apply for a CUP, given that all of their golf carts are stored within an enclosed building, which is one of the allowances for exceptions to that section of the overlay. So just a quick reminder on that overlay, this is all motor vehicles and trailer sales, displays, rentals, or leasing are prohibited from operating outdoors in the I-35 overlay, so that would include the golf cart sales or leasing. And then the allowance for exceptions would allow the sale, rental, lease of such vehicles within a fully enclosed building. So the tenant has provided confirmation that all golf carts are or will be stored within a fully enclosed building, and there will not be any outdoor storage or display. The zoning otherwise would allow for this type of use, and based on that information, staff is recommending approval of the CUP. So your options tonight are to recommend approval as presented, recommend approval with modifications, or recommend denial. And as I mentioned, we are recommending approval of this. Any questions?
Any questions for staff?
Or just a context question. I mean, what took so long? Not to sound rude or mean or anything, but what took so long?
So typically if something's, not turned into the city, whether it's like a code complaint or anything like that, they just continue to operate until something like this comes up.
I see.
Good.
Does any of that property, just out of curiosity, conform to the overlay standards, or did it predate the standards?
It predates the standards. That those buildings have been there for, I don't even know how long.
I can tell from the property next door, it's probably been there a long time, right?
And so they applied in September 2025 for a certificate of occupancy. And what was the intention for that application? Or is it just to become compliant, or were there other future goals?
My understanding was there was some, they needed documentation for like insurance purposes. And so they were submitting for it at that time, at which point staff said, hang on a second, this doesn't comply with the overlay. So we can't sign off on a certificate of occupancy if it doesn't, when Jason and I are looking, we're looking at primarily the use if it's an existing structure. And so we basically said we can't sign off on this if it doesn't comply. And so that's how we got here.
Thank you.
Question regarding the use of the property. The carts would be stored indoors outside of business hours. Is the business to rent or to sell golf carts?
To sell.
To sell. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we would need a motion to take action.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend approval from Commissioner Webb and a second from Commissioner Copeland. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Only that I learned something new on this one, because I've always wondered why there aren't golf carts lined up outside like there are at every other dealership. So now I understand why.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, that one's approved. Last item on our list, consider and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding proposed amendments to Exhibit C of the Kyle 57 Planned Unit Development Ordinance Number 1133, which would eliminate the requirement for a fence along the western boundary of the Sage Hollow subdivision, to preserve the existing vegetative screening. We also have a public hearing for this item, so I've got one. No, you've got stuff here.
I do.
Do you want to read those first?
I will.
Okay, so public hearing is open at 7:15.
All right, commissioners, I think Kayla did hand these out. I think you have copies of these at the dais, but if okay, I'll go ahead and read them into the record. We have a total of 3. The first one is from Stephanie Westerledge at 105 Julia Cove. She is not in favor because there's very large trees on the property line. That is the only shade my backyard gets, as my septic field is in my backyard, plus the trees give me more privacy than the fence. As I said, these trees are on the property line. Letter number 2 comes from John and Belinda Johnson at 141 Glocken Lane. And they are in favor because we would like the natural vegetation to remain as a barrier. Please avoid destruction of the vegetation when possible. We support the amendment to eliminate a fence. And the third and final one that we received was from Mr. Gorman at 180 Tenney Lane, and he is not in favor because the fence will block the view of the commercial. The fence will block the view of the commercial property. And that completes the letters that we received.
Okay. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak in the public hearing tonight? Okay, we'll go ahead and close that at 7:16. And we'll move to the presentation. Ms. Sharp.
All right, good evening, Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. Last one from me for the evening. So this is a proposed PUD amendment to remove the requirement for a fence along the western property boundary of the Sage Hollow subdivision. So just a little background, the request is, as I said, to eliminate the requirement to install the fence. This subdivision is everything that you see in the pink, and that western boundary is kind of what you see planned like northwest adjacent to the Quail Meadows subdivision. So again, a little more background. The Sage Hollow PUD was adopted in 2021. It's located off of West FM 150, west of North Old Stagecoach Road, and FM 2770. It's primarily a single-family residential subdivision. There are also 2 commercial tracks along FM 150. And the intent of the amendment is to kind of keep some of the existing vegetative screening, which I'll show you in a little bit more detail here in a second. This kind of highlights the impacted property boundary. This is what's highlighted in red is the only area that we're proposing to remove the fencing requirement. And then here's kind of an aerial view. You can kind of get an idea of how much vegetation there is and how much screening it kind of does provide from that adjacent subdivision. And some photos of the existing screening. Pretty much if a fence were to be constructed as required by the PUD, almost all of this would have to be removed. So some of these trees may not be the best in terms of they're not live oaks and things like that, but they do provide some pretty substantial screening. So the existing language in the PUD requires a fence along the property line adjacent to all neighboring tracks, but it would be constructed of something like wrought iron, horizontal wood frame with cattle panel, or something comparable, more decorative. It wouldn't really provide any privacy or screening. And the proposed language, we're basically just removing the requirement along the western property boundary in an attempt to save some of that vegetative screening. So analysis of the request, installing the fence as required would result in removal of some or all of the existing vegetation. The neighboring tract is also outside of Kyle city limits, as you saw on the zoning map provided. And then the required fence type would not provide any screening of any kind. And a majority of the residents in the adjacent subdivision indicated that they would prefer to keep the existing screening. The homes within the Sage Hollow subdivision adjacent to this boundary will also still have privacy fencing on the rear of their property line, and then there's a water line and drainage easement that runs between those homes and the adjacent subdivision. So your options here tonight are to recommend approval as presented, recommend approval with modifications, or recommend denial. And then staff is recommending approval as presented. Any questions?
I've got a question. In terms of that space, there's right-of-ways through there, easements for utilities, I would suppose. It's mowed now or cleared. My one big concern is that everybody stops paying attention to this space. And I've seen here between subdivisions, things do not get mowed or taken care of, or people disagree about it. The end point or concern I have is wildfire safety. And that if that is neglected or let go, just because we've gotten through this whole business with the fence, I am concerned about safety, fire safety. So that'll be up to the HOAs, I suppose, in the city to hammer that out, but I think it's a real concern.
Yes, there's, it serves as a drainage easement. There's also a water line running through there. So there will be maintenance between city for the water line and then also HOA. There, it will be maintained.
Are there other questions for staff?
I read the written comments a couple different ways, so just for clarification, a vote in favor of this proposal would mean that the trees remain, there will not be a fence. A vote against this removes the trees and adds a fence.
Correct.
And that fence line that would be put would be generally see-through, right? It would just be that black iron gaps between.
Correct.
Okay. With relative clear visibility on both sides of that property line if that fence was to be established.
Correct. It's a little bit hard to see in this, the photo to the left because there is some vegetation there, but you can see the image to the very far left. There is kind of fencing for those homes there already. Let's see. You can kind of see in this image there are fences along the back property lines of the new homes in the Sage Hollow subdivision. So those will have your typical like residential privacy fencing. And then there's that easement, and then the adjacent subdivision that has the screening.
And so with this image on, I'll call it Plan South, below that red line, that's the new development. Above it is the existing development. Above is outside of city limits. And it looks like from this image where that red line is at, most of those trees are on the other side of the city line. Is that correct, or is that just where the line looks here, where it's not truly an accurate depiction of where that boundary is?
Yeah, this isn't 100% accurate by any means. A lot of those trees kind of fall right on the property line. So as part of the subdivision construction, if a fence were to be installed, pretty much any of those that fall like right along the property line or inside the property line of the subdivision would end up being removed in order to install the fence.
Thank you.
And those folks that plan north, are they relying on the tree line as kind of like a back fence, as it were? Like, you get rid of that, the dog gets out, right? You know what I mean? Is that kind of the way it is?
Somewhat, I believe some of them do have fences. I'm not sure whether all of them do or not, but they do all have that vegetative screening and kind of buffer between them and this new subdivision. I know the home builder worked pretty closely with them to try and get some sort of consensus on whether everyone wanted a fence or no fence, and this is kind of where we've landed, is
Sure.
to attempt to leave the screening alone as is.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Help me with these comments. I've got one here, John Gorman. I'm not in favor of this. The fence will block the view of commercial property, which means he's against the vegetation.
There are several ways these comments could be interpreted.
This is the problem. I wonder.
Yes.
Wording of the agenda item, I guess, might have confused some folks.
Yeah, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth,
Right,
but
right.
I think there might be some confusion on where we were proposing to remove the requirement for the fence. The only two commercial properties are, you can see one of them's constructed and it's a daycare. And that's kind of closer to Plan Right, but not all the way over. And then there's a parcel to the Plan North of that, right along 150 as well. Those are the only two commercial properties that kind of fall within this planned unit development.
General comment I have, as a citizen first, actually, and then as vice chair, is that I'm concerned, disappointed that more people from the subdivision haven't weighed in on this. This puts us in a unique and difficult position of approving or denying something without any idea of what the bulk of them really want, except to say many of them want it. We have 3 comments. This seems to be the kind of situation, I'm saying this for the record and for people who may listen to this on YouTube, or Kyle 10, that these are the situations that city bodies are put in discussing public affairs. There's no involvement to speak of, very little. And we're in the situation of making a decision that's going to impact a lot of people. And we have to use our best judgment, but our best judgment may fail at times when there's not much information, not much incoming opinion. So in making this vote, if somebody's upset about this and say, well, only 3 people made comments and they're making a decision on that, I would just say calmly and kindly that you had the chance to do this, and we would have loved to have heard it.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we need a motion to take action on this potential recommendation.
Motion to approve as presented, which to be clear, would leave the trees in place and the fence line would not be a requirement of the current agreement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve or recommend approval from Commissioner Copeland and a second from Commissioner Houck. Is there any discussion on that one?
Yes. So a couple of things stuck out to me about this one. And Vice Chair Siegel, I completely agree with your concerns here. I think there's a lot of people who probably have weighed in on this in other forums that are not the public comment period here. So that would have been really helpful to have that information. This is not the first time that we have seen something come back to change right at the end. It's different from the way that it was approved and presented beforehand. Oftentimes, those things result in less expense at the end of a project. So I don't know the motivations behind this particular request, but it does seem to be a pattern of things that we've seen over and over again on this committee. The one lesson that we do have to learn from here is Plum Creek, because Plum Creek had this very exact issue about 10 years ago. There's a section of Plum Creek, 6H. It's a gated section surrounded by black wrought iron fencing. The developer at the time said, there's a natural barrier here, so I'm not going to complete the fence. There's I think it's a little over 100-foot section of fence that's not completed. The natural barrier was some weeds and bushy vegetation and things of that nature. And about every 2 years, the group in 6H gets together and they're very, very upset that it wasn't completed. And they call attorneys and they come to the HOA, and all of it culminates in, it's too late, there's nothing you can do now. So I have a hard time voting to get rid of the fence, understanding that the same exact thing happened in the neighborhood that I live in, and it causes problems to this day, and it's a problem that will never go away. It'll never go away unless the residents take a special assessment to go build a fence, which will also never happen. The other lesson that I've learned from Plum Creek with water line easements that butt up to other privately owned property and city property and things like that is if there is not a well-defined boundary with who is required to maintain not just the grass, but the trees, it won't happen. And it will be a long, drawn-out fight. I rolled off the Plum Creek HOA board about 6 months ago, and for the last 2 years of my time on the board, it was a fight between the city and the neighboring property and the HOA about who was going to maintain a water drainage easement. And now there are bulldozers there, so somebody lost, but I don't know who. Those are my concerns with voting to remove the requirement for the fence. As a matter of personal preference, I would much rather see the vegetation and the trees there than the fence. But as a matter of practicality and being consistent with what was approved, I don't think I can vote for it.
Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Based off the public comments that we have received, I would weigh that the public has voiced a, I don't know, preponderance in favor of keeping vegetation, but fully respect what I've heard tonight of 3 voices is not everybody that we can see along that line.
I guess, is it within our purview to say, hey, we'll leave the vegetation as long as, the HOA in that area and the city or whoever gets together and hammers out an agreement of who's gonna take care of this place, like,
I believe maintenance has already been established,
Yeah.
and we can always go back and verify. That wouldn't be something that y'all would be making a decision on tonight,
Okay.
but we can absolutely double check that those
'Cause,
maintenance
yeah,
obligations are in place.
I definitely hear what Webb's saying, like, that's a problem for the Plum Creek neighborhood, but if there's something already hammered out here, I don't see any reason why, we should worry too much about it.
I do think maintenance is established, but you're right. People change and things evolve as a subdivision. I will say as staff and the developer, did kind of talk about maybe this is my terminology, maybe a mixed approach of kind of doing the fencing, and we were like, hey, that's gonna be even worse from a staff perspective to have some fences somewhere at some locations and not in others. So you really need to kind of have a holistic design. I do think that the applicant's here, if you have questions for him, he has kind of tracked down the most adjacent out-of-city property owners to kind of talk about that fence line with them. But as you saw in the responses, we did notify everybody within the blue as well, but kind of the existing subdivision as well, in the notification process, as well as the surrounding property owners on this.
Thank you.
This is a plan unit development that was annexed based on it being plan unit development.
I'm not sure if it was annexed.
That was the deal.
I'm sure it probably was annexed with it being right on the border of city limits. But yes.
That's my understanding. I think I heard the mayor say that one time. So, I missed the meeting. I've got to talk. Here's another note. Here's another note. Here's a plan unit development that left business unfinished. The fence was supposed to be there. They left it unfinished. We would not, should not even have to talk about this actually, except for the failure of a developer. And so this is a burden on us. It's work for us, and it's work and stress for the people who live here who are concerned about this. Just want to make that note too.
And so along that line then, for clarification, if the agreement remains in place and a fence has to be established, who bears the cost of establishing that fence line?
So this subdivision's not yet complete. It would
Okay.
still be the developer. This is a request from the developer to remove this requirement. So they would still be responsible.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and I would like to add on just the discussion of the fence itself and how we got here. This is not something that just came up today. These conversations actually started probably a year and a half or so more ago. I know the applicants met with the adjacent landowners several times. All those existing property along that property have existing fences. It's just a patchwork of what those are. So you'll see some wrought iron, you'll see some barbed wire. Some of the barbed wire is in good condition. Other properties, it's deteriorated. So there are existing fences. Those people have chosen to fence their property. So access issues, the need for a fence has been addressed on their side. This conversation was really just if we're going to build this, we may have to remove some trees. And so they reached out to the neighbors to see how they would feel about that before they just started cutting. So that's kind of the crux of the issue.
And to add on to that, the adjacent property owners could still choose to remove any of the vegetation on their own property to install additional fencing if they so choose now or in the future. This is specifically just right along that property line that we're talking about here.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of discussion with residents in this area and a lot of input, but these are the only ones we have. Is there a survey sent out where we can look at the results, email communications, notes from a meeting, anything besides these three?
Sounds like a yes.
Waiting for Kayla to give me the cue here. So I'm Steve Walkup, I'm with the developer, and you've got a pretty good piece of the entire story. It's been a pretty long and drawn out, I don't know if you call it it's not necessarily a problem. When you look at this boundary, there is an enormous amount of really good hardwood trees along this boundary. We could install the fence and do what the PUD says we should do. If we do that, we take out every tree on the boundary, and it completely wipes out the vegetation. And we put in a wrought iron fence, and that doesn't really provide. It's not good for either side, in my opinion. Yes, the folks on the adjacent property, I met with them several times. The responses that you're getting on these petitions is part of the problem that we've had. It's been difficult to articulate exactly what our intentions are. Some people want a fence and also their vegetation. Some people don't. And so we could never really reach an agreement with these adjacent property owners to get them exactly what they want. And so that's basically where we are. We can do exactly what the PUD says. We have no problem doing it. I just feel like that by doing that, we don't really accomplish a good outcome for both the Sage Hollow community and the adjacent community, which is not in the city limits. So I'm here to answer any questions and kind of give you even more backstory if you do need it. Not sure if that helped at all, but I'm available.
And so why was there a requirement in the beginning to have that wrought iron fence? What's the historical context here that we're missing?
Very good question. So the PUD was associated with the development agreement. The development agreement, probably a little bit haphazardly at the end of the negotiation, it was agreed to put in a boundary along each side. It was either a wrought iron fence, what we called a cattle fencing, which would have been sort of the wire mesh fencing, I guess, to keep cattle out, although there's no cattle on either side. And then on the other side, on the I guess that's the south side, we did agree to put in a larger concrete wall along there to satisfy a particular owner on the south side of the property. So each side of the property had, we intended to do that. It just so happens on this side, there's a really, really dense boundary of trees, which we did not want to remove, so.
There we go. And so, if I understand right, at the original onset of this agreement, there was discussion with residents or whoever's going to buy these properties long-term in terms of what they wanted to have. There was a negotiation process, and at that point in time, it was believed that the fence would satisfy most. Today, that balance may have shifted. Is that a fair statement?
Somewhat. I think the idea of putting in a wrought iron fence, at the time, it wasn't considered that on this side of the property, we would have to completely remove all vegetation, which eliminated any benefit that a fence would provide. And so it was at the onset, it probably was just a haphazard attempt to I don't know, satisfy a comment or what, but adding that wrought iron language in there was probably just a mistake. It should have been another type of fence, or it should have been another way to address that boundary.
I'll just say, generally, when you're looking at doing plan developments or ordinances, fences make good neighbors sometimes, and having consistency on property lines. And then when you have one developer coming in, you have a holistic approach to maybe address some of the boundary issues on fencing. I don't think there was, at that time, Commissioner Copeland, I don't think there was any correspondence with the neighbors on what they wanted when this was originally drafted years ago. I think when it became to truly implement, what was written in the code is when the developer started like, ooh, if I'm putting in this fence over here, it's really not going to achieve potentially the desired results of what that fence was. So maybe let's look at, some other options.
Yeah, this was also not like the PUDs y'all see now where they're very, very detailed and almost, not that the PUDs y'all see now are fully engineered out, but this didn't have the level of detail in it that some of the newer ones that you see do, so it probably just wasn't taken into consideration, or more than likely we're looking at, okay, sure, let's secure the boundaries of the subdivision and call it a day, and then as you get into engineering and finishing things out, that's when this was kind of identified as a potential issue.
Yep. And then my last question for the time, give me some context here on one of these public comments that we have of the fence will block the view of commercial property. What is the commercial property that's closest to, can you give me context there?
I actually think that's just a mistake. There's a commercial property in that corner that's going up right now. That's the only thing I can think that they would reference. The Johnsons, I've talked with them multiple times about it. They would prefer to have a vegetative screen. Stephanie lives in the adjacent property, and I think she's misunderstanding, again, the language of the amendment. She's saying that there are very large trees on the property line, and I guess in an attempt to say that she wants to keep her vegetation. So I think a lot of the language is she's just confused about what we're voting. So.
And for the commercial one, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think it is truly a misunderstanding. We were looking at the address provided, and it does kind of fall in the middle of the subdivision. So, best guess, and I don't want to speak for anybody, they're probably looking at the commercial properties closer to 150 is what they're probably thinking. But again, don't know that for a fact.
Sure. And Madam Chair, I'll just note that I saw a hand go up in the audience of wanting to speak. I don't know logistically how we would bring any more comments in, but wanted just to make sure you saw that there was maybe another request to speak.
Okay, thanks for mentioning that. I don't actually know what the protocol is for that. Ms. Alcorn-Reed?
As the chair, Madam Chair, you run the meeting. If you would like to permit members of the audience to speak again, you are allowed to do so.
Okay. I would permit members of the audience to speak, if anyone would like to come forward. Yep. If you could state your name for the record.
Hello. I'm a little short. So it's Lizette Ibarra, and I live at 370 Treadwell Lane, so in the Sage Hollow neighborhood. The reason we're here is because we live in that neighborhood, but when we received the request and also the option to vote, we were really not sure what we were talking about in terms of which line it was. We thought it was the line directly behind us, and that's where the Six Creeks development is happening. They're currently cutting down a ton of trees back there, and so we were concerned about, great, now they're gonna cut even more trees right behind our house, and so that's what we thought that this line was. So we came here in an attempt to get information and not make any speculation or vote on something that we weren't 100% sure of. But now that we're clear on what it is, that line of trees, it is large, beautiful trees that would not exist. And I feel like we're already losing a ton of trees in our backyard. That is kind of sad to see, and now to lose that too. I wouldn't want to see that either. And there's no commercial line to see anything commercially or anything. The person that commented, I think that was on Glocken, and they don't live, they live right in the middle of our subdivision. So that was all I had to say. And I don't know if I can still turn this in, now that I know. Yes, okay.
Thank you for taking the time to speak.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we do have a motion out right now for recommending approval of this, which would keep the vegetation in place. More comments? More discussion? Yes.
Two questions, actually, that came up as a result of that comment. The first, I think in an image, we saw that some of these existing houses already have a fence, and then this would be a little bit behind that. Who owns that strip of property between the existing fence and the new fence? Does the homeowner's lot extend all the way to the proposed fence, or is that HOA owned?
I believe it's HOA, yes.
Okay. And then if we vote to leave the vegetation there, understanding that part of it's on HOA property, part of it's on a city easement, is there a possibility that in the future, either the city for maintenance reasons or the HOA for, whatever their reasons would be at the time, could come in and cut that down? Like, is it possible that in 5 years, there's no vegetation and no fence?
As far as what's along the actual property line, it's kind of twofold. The HOA shouldn't be removing any trees without permission from the city because we have a tree protection ordinance. If it's city for maintenance reasons, there is some possibility, but generally we try to leave as much as possible. The neighbors could tear down what's on their side of the property boundary.
As well, if they wanted to redo or change out their existing fence as well. So I do want to say this isn't protecting them necessarily forever. There is potential for, the removal of trees in the future. But this would, if approving this would eliminate the requirement for Milestone to build a fence on that property line.
Yeah, thank you. I think my concern is that we tell them you don't have to build a fence there, and then 5 years from now, some of those trees are gone anyway, and.
So I would like to point out, I guess the image isn't on there. So there, I think in one of the images Kayla had, it was kind of showing that view down that easement. Yeah. That easement was cleared for the installation of a water line. So to your point, in the future, if that line ever needed to be upsized to something significantly bigger, that could need to be widened and could cause the city to take out some additional trees. At this point, there's no plans for an upsizing on that. That's serving just a few homes, so we don't foresee that. But again, that's not always going to be the case. But it should not be widened anymore from the city standpoint. It is HOA owned. It is HOA maintained, just to clear up some of your questions from earlier.
And if there's a fence line and that water line has to be expanded, that fence would also have to be, or could be removed as part of that expansion project.
It could. So that fence line is most likely, if it were to be installed, would have to be 6 inches in on the property line. There are existing fences. I'd venture to say some of those probably cross that property line just because old cattle fences generally aren't that accurate. So a lot can happen. I think ultimately the request before you is do we want that fence to stay as part of this requirement? And if so, why is that? And I think the neighbors have kind of spoken to that.
So then what I'm hearing is that we could approve for vegetation. I want everybody to understand, first of all, myself, there's no guarantee that vegetation will remain. There are several clear instances where it could be taken down. And that's not on the commission or like there was a misunderstanding. It's just that there are other agreements or circumstances that rule the situation.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question about the proposed PUD language. So this exception that we would be carving in, it says where the existing natural vegetation shall be preserved in lieu of a fence. Should something happen to that natural vegetation, would that then reinstate the fencing requirement?
No, it would not.
Okay.
Could it?
I suppose there's a way to write it to where that would be the case, but you're gonna have a really hard time enforcing that, especially when it's, kind of an area that's not in a
Well,
highly visible or traveled area.
I think the bigger issue is the notice was for the language of
Yeah.
of prohibiting the fence. I think a change like that may not be covered under what was noticed for. I'll lean to Amy to answer that, but that's probably some of our concern in case that you're thinking that route.
I have concerns about that route once the developer is out of the
Yeah.
picture. Or is it gonna be an HOA requirement to add the fence? Who's gonna be required to add the fence? And that is all stuff that we can't really negotiate right now
Sure.
from this floor.
Thank you.
If history repeats itself, it would be on the HOA and the homeowners, because I know Plum Creek tried to go back to the developer multiple times, but once the project's done, there wasn't any recourse.
I guess that's actually kind of a benefit then, because if this happens 10, 20 years down the road, the homeowners at that time would get to have a say in what happens along their property lines in the community. They would be able to discuss it together then. Our trees are gone. What do we do now? Let's decide and take action rather than having some board, like we're dealing with PUD language from 4 years ago. None of us were here then, and now we're trying to kind of clean up an oversight that happened there. So, yeah, leaving it for the future residents to deal with if it becomes necessary makes sense to me. Any other discussion on this motion? Okay, let's vote. The motion is to recommend approval of this ordinance verbiage change. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, that one passes. Thank you.
Our lone audience member changed my mind, so thank you.
All right, next we have staff reports and presentations. Mr. Leeds.
Real quickly, I'm about to turn it over to our city's consultant from Freeze and Nichols. But today, we're going to kind of discuss where we're at with our Unified Development Code rewrite. So February 4th of this year's city selected Freeze and Nichols as our consultant. They're tasked with codifying key components of our newly adopted comp plan and also to kind of consolidate the various sections of our code that we have and make sure that our left hand and our right hand are shaking and not fighting each other, especially when it comes from department to department, whether that's planning, public works, or city streets. So the city's consultant, they've been conducting a comprehensive diagnostic of our code, looking at some of the things that may be problematic, things that either they've identified, staff has identified, or stakeholders have identified, and looking at possibly making some changes. So based on that feedback that they've taken from stakeholders, they completed this draft diagnostic report for you, kind of high level. Here's some of the major impacts, issues that they've identified with our existing code. And so I'm going to let them speak to that. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chance right now, and he'll lead you through.
All right, thanks so much, Jason. Really happy to be here tonight. Chance Sparks, Freeze and Nichols, and we're going to be talking through this diagnostic report. Now, we'll be the first to say this type of report tends to be technical in nature, which means it is likely not the most exciting document you have read, probably not even this week. But it is highly technical. We try to keep it at a higher level, recognizing that, well, for starters, this is not the only bite of the apple you're going to have in this code conversation. This is simply the first bite. As we go into the drafting process, more of this will get fleshed out. For example, we don't know exactly how we're going to draft a specific provision right now. We know the general direction that we think we want to go in. But when it comes to how does it actually get written, how does it function, that'll be some conversations with y'all along the way, along with some code testing, working with stakeholders, things like that. So that's just to kind of set the stage for this. Also, I don't think I will ever do a presentation on this topic without reminding you that you are following a best practice on this right now. You are tackling your development code and your engineering manual at the same time. We have written many really well done development codes only to have the engineering manual not get updated, and they basically get into a fist fight with each other from that point forward. So it's really great that you're tackling these together. It's a big ask, so we do recognize that. Again, this is diagnostic. Number one for us is operationalizing your adopted plans, your comprehensive plans, the vibe plan, all those types of things. What we try to do is capture issue statements, what do we hear from different stakeholders, and synthesize them into a summary of the direction we think we're going from this point forward. We focus on user-friendly, defensible. We want this thing to do well in a trip to court if it ever has to. Facilitate your development process. You're going to hear me use a word a lot tonight, and that's the word simple. Simple does not mean lax. Simple means easy to understand, easy to apply correctly in the code process. To put it more bluntly, it means that a developer, a design professional can read your code and not have to pick up the phone to call Melissa's team for an hour-long conversation about what a provision means. That provision should be clear and straightforward, no matter how strict it is. And provide innovative solutions and approaches. We think this is very likely given some of the values that y'all have expressed through your comprehensive planning efforts. For example, we're expecting some hybrid style codes. Your vibe trail approach is interesting. That's going to lead to some unique code approaches going forward. So our format, we're going to kind of take you through an orientation tour of this document, hitting the high points. We recognize that if we went on a very deep dive, we could be here for 2 hours. If that happens, I am 100% confident that Melissa's going to go out and slash my tires. What you'll find throughout this is an emphasis on connecting things that we heard, either within your plans or within stakeholder meetings, that tie directly to recommendations. We like to make that connection because, honestly, when we get down the road into code drafting, people forget this part, and that these things all had an origin story. We hear a lot about lots of very technical detail in your code. It makes your code dense and hard to read. We hear about this emphasis on celebrating small local places and trying to create reasons for people to stay in town, do their stuff here. We've heard a lot about finding innovative ways to draft code. We've talked a lot with people about a points-based system. We tend to like this a lot because it allows you to dial things up and dial things down like a thermostat based on where you are in the city, how much you want to emphasize and push a higher level of quality versus other areas where it might be less important or have a different weight to different parts of what defines a quality development. And standards for common things like your utilities, sidewalks, trees, things like that. We were actually just talking about the fence topic tonight and provisions that we could envision in a code that could help address that in the future. We talk with your staff, of course, and we also talk with a variety of engagement groups, design professionals, home builders, your downtown stakeholders, developers, broader spectrum development activity, development corporation, y'all early on. We also had a really great event at City Fest that we define a good event as we get a lot of good feedback, and we actually enjoy it too. It was a great festival. And we take that and try to synthesize it into recommendations. So again, here's where we're going with this. We looked at several of your resources along the way, your adopted plans. You've heard us talk about this in the past. We had several themes that emerged. A key one being the user experience of your code. It needs to be user-friendly. Separating your very detailed technical criteria. What we think about with that is who's the audience. For your development regulations, you want that to be approachable to any property owner, things like that. Your technical stuff, though, tends to be very focused on engineers and other design professionals. That type of language tends to be difficult for people to understand and approach. We look at updating your zoning regulations. This is an area where we're going to spend the most energy. It's going to be consolidating some of your zoning districts. You have zoning districts that are used on exactly one parcel, or sometimes no parcels. We want to look at your plan development process, whether you're getting what you want to out of it. How can we simplify and strengthen your corridor overlays? We heard that tonight as well. You have overlays that don't necessarily have specific standards tied to them. Introducing some form-based to support your downtown, and expand on concepts like your Vibe Trails plan. Those are kind of like the big overarching things. So we're going to kind of go into a little bit of each chapter of your current regulations and touch on what are some of the high points that we've found along the way. We're going to do a lot of what we would call code hygiene, adjusting where definitions are located, putting them all in one spot. That alone makes a big difference, removing duplicate definitions. Looking at the things that you want to be able to have more agility with, your submission standards, your fees, things like that that you want to be able to adopt separately. We want to ensure good cross-references across things, but also thinking about new things you can do in your codes. Recent state law, for example, allows for a single stair walk-up. That is a really technical thing. What I can tell you, though, is that in your downtown, you have lots of skinny buildings. If you want skinny buildings to have a functional second floor, having a dual egress for that second floor is pretty challenging. So if you can create that flexibility, that's part of how you get there. We're going to look at your business regulations. You have some that should probably move into the development code. There's others that you want to keep in that business regulation space. There's also things that are very active right now. Food trucks, for example, there's active state law provisions where there's going to be some rulemaking at the state level to address mobile food vendors and things like that. Y'all will most likely focus on siting once the dust clears away. We'll talk about flooding. This is Central Texas. Flooding is always front of mind here. We're going to think about how to align policy versus technical standards. A regular resident doesn't want to read a whole lot about hydraulic and hydrologic modeling. I'm a planner and do this for a living. I don't want to read about it. We want to look at some stricter floodplain standards. We want to think about freeboard. That's how you elevate above the floodplain, but also how you assess no adverse impact to other properties downstream. That's a key thing to think about, as well as watershed thinking in this, with how you break up your city to evaluate stormwater. We'll look at your parks and recreation, pulling in obviously Vibe Plan, your parks and recreation and open space plan that y'all are just finishing up here. Sign standards, the name of the game in sign standards is focusing on content neutrality. You should not have to read the sign to regulate it. That's the simplest way to explain it. Avoid text-heavy provisions. You have a very wordy sign regulation. You want to shift that into tables, charts, things like that. Add visuals to help understand how you measure things along the way. Site development, we're going to bring this into a more strong alignment with state law where it's more obvious that you're aligning with it. And make sure we've got good cross-referencing across everything that is affected. Also think about what triggers a site development plan. Are there levels of site development that have different standards to them? If you've got like a little project versus a big project, how much do you have to plan ahead? Streets, sidewalks, other public places. This is going to be really focusing on implementing your transportation network, recognizing that bike and pedestrian infrastructure is every bit a part of the global mobility consideration for things like right-of-way, maintaining right-of-ways as things develop and things like that. We'll, of course, get into subdivisions. The subdivision regulation or subdivision laws for the state of Texas were essentially rewritten a couple of years ago. And as a result, that means virtually every city is going through some type of robust rewriting of their subdivision procedures. We're going to look at your administrative options for plat approval. If you've been through some of those where you notify everybody, they all come here only to find out that you can't actually do anything, it's a ministerial function, then they leave mad. I'm sure that has never happened here. We want to make sure that that is avoided while you still get that appropriate level of daylighting of the development process. Local traffic, making sure we're getting all that tied together across different processes and procedures, really good traffic impact tools built into your code. Address all the utilities. This is mostly going to be shifting a whole bunch of very technical language into that criteria manual along the way. That'll also simplify the overall structure of your code. Zoning is going to be the feature presentation. We're going to be looking at consolidation. We're going to do some equivalency tables. That's where you say these zoning districts today are these zoning districts tomorrow, everything else, all else being equal. We're going to look at reducing some of these either districts that are redundant or very similar or simply unused. and bring those together to be a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier to work with. Also recognize how the market works today. Your current use definitions are all tied to what we call SIC codes. This is a really bad practice because people have a hard time understanding them. It's very hard to align what somebody is doing to the definition. You want to get those into more of a normal household language. A smart eighth grader is sometimes how we phrase that. We'll look at your parking standards by district and use. There's going to be some discussions about where do you want to require minimum parking, where don't you? Where do you want to dial that back? How do you want to approach parking and circulation? One of the things that we heard was some very specific site references in Kyle of places that do this really well and some places that don't do it as well. And trying to find ways to codify that so that the stuff that works well, you repeat that along the way. As I mentioned, we talked about point-based site design systems, so you can have this address your building form, design, landscaping, parking, materials, and resilience tools like low-impact development. We like that type of method because it actually forces design professionals into a creative space. You can set minimums for each of those areas, but then a larger overall maximum. So that way it's, hey, you got to get to this number. You've reached your minimums, but you still got to get to this. Find your creative path to get to this number. It also lets you adjust that for things like your overlay districts. For example, in one overlay, maybe I-35, you're placing a really high emphasis on landscaping and building structure. But if you're on a corridor that's maybe further out west, maybe it's over towards recharge contributing zone areas, maybe you want to dial up the emphasis on low impact development tools and things like that. So that's one of the things that we like about those point systems. They're also really predictable in terms of when you've got it, when you haven't. Allows a lot of flexibility so you don't get what I sometimes call the petty PUD, where it's a PUD to change like 2 or 3 items in your code. And you're kind of probably sitting up there thinking, this is not a great use of my time. Try to build stuff like that into the code so you don't have to do that. Landscaping. This is an area where there's going to be another good investment here, thinking about water conservation with y'all and how to ensure that that is maintainable long term, but also setting some really good solid base standards for landscaping. This is an area of your code that's a little bit vague, a little bit fuzzy. So we see this as a good opportunity for improvement. Also looking at your tree preservation language, making sure you've got the right professionals tied to the right things. For example, your landscaping talks about arborists, but your tree preservation doesn't as much. That should actually be flipped. So some things like that we want to definitely tackle. So again, that's a very broad spectrum overview. My goal was to take you through this so that way you can see what conversations do y'all want to have here tonight. What's important? What do y'all think should be emphasized? Areas where you think we should spend the most time? Some things like that. So with that, I will hush and pass it back to y'all.
Thank you very much. Who has questions?
I'll have a ton for Google later, but.
Mr. Sparks, you mentioned that we currently use SIC codes and that they're very bad. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So SIC codes are used for really a couple of purposes. They are used for labor statistics reporting. They are used for economic development reports. The issue that you have with them is that there's thousands of them. And that's what makes them really unapproachable. You have to figure out how to dig in to figure out what the use is and then dial it back up to an overall like 6 subcategory.
Yeah.
That's hard for a regular person to do.
It is. I mean, what's really difficult for it, what I would call a retail shop, which is essentially a business that's serving retail, which maybe you would want to define by size of structure, like big box versus middle versus little, like it'll have 100 different codes because you'll separate retail for clothes versus retails for electronics versus retail for medicine versus retail for, something else. So it really drills down super specific on that, which maybe some of those areas you want some specificity, but some of those areas you don't care if it's clothes or computers or furniture.
A great example of that would be Walmart and H-E-B. Two completely different SIC codes. But from a planning perspective, that is a big box. There's very similar use, traffic patterns, things like that. But in our codes, completely different.
Yeah, so what we tend to emphasize instead is, you heard Melissa reference intensity. We want to think about uses in terms of their intensity, in terms of their potential for nuisance and things like that. And so that way you're regulating like things together along the way and using normal people language for it.
And as part of the agenda packet, there were 50 some odd pages of additional reference materials. Are we going over that tonight, or do you want us to give you feedback on what we've read, or what does the process look like between now and final codification of this report?
Oh gosh, I would say if you had some specifics, we could definitely talk about those tonight. I did want to give it to you because you guys are a great group that really dig into stuff, which I appreciate. I think staff has looked at that, and we're continuing to look at that. We're providing comments, honestly. So if you had some, we could absolutely feed that back to them as well. But again, this is just one step in the process. So by all means, this is kind of setting up the foundation for them to continue to analyze and rewrite the code. So yeah, it's kind of, I would say we have a little bit of opportunity of both. If you had some specifics, we definitely have the professionals here to talk about it. If you wanted to write some comments down and follow up and give it to staff later, that's a true option as well.
Every commission's different, which is why we kind of say your call on how you want to communicate it.
I got one comment that's very encouraging. I think this overall, obviously I'm not a technical person, I don't work in the field of planning, but it looks really good so far. It's a good draft, and I appreciate what you've done here very much. Of course, the kind of things that catch my eyes would be this item on page 15 where it says strengthen and clarify PUD district approval criteria without jeopardizing flexibility and decision-making process and so on. I think that's well identified and would serve us all quite well if that were dealt with that way. So I'm glad to see things like that. My overall comment, before we get into the weeds any farther, is that it sounds like it would make less onerous work for staff. The hour-long phone calls and so forth.
I think that's exactly why staff's been seeking this, is to provide clarity for the areas that are unclear. I think our code has been amended or added onto, but kind of in a hodgepodge way, which always happens to codes. But I think this is really an opportunity to holistically bring it all together and have it reference each other. And then, as Chance was talking about, I think it's an opportunity as we continue to grow in a city to really kind of look at some of the engineering standards that we have too. As you saw, it's not always fun to talk about lane assignments for utilities and exactly what we're wanting for that, but it is so valuable when you're looking at a developing city and really kind of understanding where everyone's going for that too, and really kind of honing in on whether it's a preferred specific driveway criteria that we want, or culvert for drainage. We're able to analyze that and put that into the engineering criteria manual, and then also reference it, in the code in general. So this is an opportunity, and then piggybacking off of our comp plan that we just adopted to really kind of implement some of those and incorporate some of those different housing types that we're wanting, understanding that different home builders or different builders in the area are attracted to different elements, that can achieve different things. So maybe working in some carrots that would get us, some of the preferred housing types that we want in the code as well. So I think it piggybacks off kind of the comp plan for that as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that I saw that I quite quickly and very much appreciate as well, is it really fits nicely with the comp plan. And really, I think from those of us who worked on the comp plan, it was really a case of, okay, now we get to the code. Yeah, and so I think we're doing this, and it makes sense what you're doing. It sounds like staff time could be better used now if this is put into place. It sounds like a little less work for us, actually. Because as I would read this, for instance, final plats wouldn't come to us. CUPs would go to staff too. So there would be less work for us. I'm not sure what we would be doing, but there would be less work for us, which means that perhaps that's a balance we need to look at, you know.
Yeah, what we think about is finding the right threshold for what should get elevated to the commission so that when you are engaged for it, you feel like it's a really good use of your time and you're helping solve an issue. But what we also see happen in other cities is it allows you as a commission to shift sometimes into that visionary space a little bit more, where you can think more about long-range planning and bigger picture stuff where you don't feel like you're just looking site by site at everything and could actually do the planning part of planning and zoning a bit more.
Well, I think there were a few of us that were looking to this, the big vision part, the next one. So it's been a wait, and I'm glad that it's happening this way.
Other questions? Feedback?
Are we planning on going into the weeds tonight or reserve it for the workshop discussions? I'm happy with either. Just want to be cognizant of what the game plan is.
I mean, there's not really a game plan. I would say if you have feedback that you want to give tonight, by all means do it. There wasn't a clear call to action in the, I guess, agenda. So not everyone may be prepared to go into the weeds tonight, and I think it would still be beneficial in the future to have, I guess, something with a bit more advance notice for people to say, okay, by this date, you need to have all of your things done, because this is a very long document. And along that line, I do have a quick question, if you don't mind
Please.
me jumping in really quick. There's a lot of different topics that are covered in this that don't necessarily relate to us per se. Is P&Z, are we needing to look at all of these things, or are there certain sections that you want us to focus on, and then the rest of them we can, you know?
Great question. I would say for sure, like, kind of, and again, this is a diagnostic. So I mean, if you're like, ooh, I really kind of like where this is headed now, I'm really going to get in when we get to the drafting of the code. I think that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I do think this is a very important part of the process because it kind of sets that foundation, but it's not the code either.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to like pull out the big picture, like, hey, here's some gaps, here's some good things, here's kind of the project approach that we're gonna do on this, and that's where we're at in this process. So you can see like drafting the code and really kind of looking at the modules is next. And if you're really gonna get in the weeds, that's when I want you to get into it too, you know, because this diagnostic is not our code yet. It's just kind of like, hey, where we're headed, this is what we saw, what do you think about this?
Basically, are we on the right track?
Are we on the right track? So that's where we're at with this diagnostic report. So if you have some comments, absolutely, I would say let's get in. We're gonna for sure invite you as a commission to attend future meetings that we have, and obviously this is not the last time that you're gonna see any of this as a commission. But your original question is what should we concentrate on? For sure, zoning. I would say for sure kind of the sign language would be something that I would look at this commission to recommend language on. Subdivisions too, honestly, you guys look at those, so I would look at that. Lighting, landscaping, kind of those bigger picture, but yeah, I mean, floodplain regulations, maybe not. You know, like I do think that's something that's handled with subdivision, but not so much that I would need your individual expertise. And I would say the same for parkland. So is parkland something that comes in with subdivision that you should be knowledge of? Yeah, but is this the exact ratio that we need to be using for the parkland dedication ordinance? I would say maybe that's a opportunity for Parks Board to weigh in on that, you know.
Will they also get the opportunity to do that?
That is my plan, absolutely. So I will say staff's absolutely in the weeds on this, which is nice. We've had a very holistic approach, kind of city staff-wide, to really kind of get on this. And you're right, as we get to like some of the language, I am going to be leaning on David and Will and Chris Escoto to kind of plug in to the parks. I think there's some art elements in here. They're doing that separate arts master plan, and I think we'll link up with the arts board on that too. Honestly, we have a new board on aging. I think they wanted to weigh in on, some of the sidewalk and access, and things on lighting. So I think there's lots of opportunities for staff to engage with our other boards and commissions and get their feedback on kind of their focus elements that you have, because again, this unified development code touches everything, citywide, so.
Thank you.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah,
this is a very exciting time.
So some of the more technical things maybe are not necessarily where we need to like become YouTube connoisseurs and study up on it and provide feedback. It'll be covered by other groups.
Absolutely, but
Okay.
absolutely. And then, but I would say, gosh, for the stuff that you're looking at all the time, subdivisions, some of uses that you would find appropriate in different zoning regulations and housing types and all of that, absolutely up your alley for sure.
Cool, okay.
But from a process standpoint, when we have a finalized code report, or whatever we want to call this document, it comes to this commission for recommendation to council. It's not going to go to 5 different, okay.
No, you're right. Yes, it would be, as kind of the code purveyors, it would come to you for consideration and recommendation to council, much like the code in general does.
Councilmember Tobias has said before at least once that he likes that P&Z is there to get down in the weeds on behalf of the council, so here we are. I have to say, though, reading this diagnostic report, as for pushing the weeds back, I see some really neat stuff in here. If we can get these weeds out of the way, I think there's some real, like, for instance, anchoring the vibe trail better within the city scheme. Maybe the end of the diagnostic, but that's something that's being neglected too much now. So I just like how it's coming together, frankly, overall.
I'd like to just add, if you really want to do a whole lot of weeding this weekend, it's always best to bring us those weeds in a bag in one big group so that Chance and his guys can digest that all at once. Would definitely be helpful. I don't think you need to kind of coordinate it by, if you want to stick it by sections, that's always sometimes helpful for us as well. But yeah, there's a lot in there, and so there's going to be a lot you'll want to change, and then depending on the draft, you may have a whole nother set of changes as well.
I'm trying to remember, for the comprehensive plan draft that we first saw, we gave comments on it, and I think we submitted it, was it an email or an online form, or how did we submit it? Because we were supposed to do something online or virtually, and then y'all consolidated it or sent it to, not to Friesen Nichols, but to the people working on the
I
comprehensive.
believe they had a spreadsheet and we were kind of all working off of, and that was circulated around. I don't know if it was the same one that we worked off of, but we could do something similar for y'all.
I think it might be helpful, because if there's comments from all of us about the same thing, that's not a good use of their time to read that. So if we can have a central list, but also at the same time, it might get long and then you don't see it and you add it anyway and it's still duplicated, but just an idea.
I think we could follow up on that, but if 6 of you had the same comment, we should absolutely address that. So I love that, that's an idea that we would have too. I do think staff can absolutely collect these, and kind of like what we did even internally for staff, they had comments and we kind of gave it over to the consultants. We could do the same and maybe have some kind of, if you prefer, kind of an online platform or shared document, that we could comment in. We could do that too.
I was going to suggest we could.
Not shared, yeah. But
Yeah,
Shared because you can't see each other's comments.
so that's part of
There we have it.
You're right, Amy.
So you
Go
can't see
being
each
all
other's-
legal over here.
I'll take a look, because we use Conveo sometimes for external coordination. I say to check and see if they would end up seeing each other's comments, but we can look at that.
Any kind of document we do, just let me review first for open meetings compliance,
Yeah.
and then we'll figure out how to
You got it.
get comments back.
But yeah, I mean, right now you have the document in your hot little hands. If you want to start writing out or, you know, adding a PDF comments in, we'd be more than happy to take those that way as well. And I wouldn't, I don't, I think as much effort or as little effort you want to put into this at this point in time is fine. I would say if you have limited time, I really would want to get you more on, like, when we go to the drafting of the code modules. I think that some of the specificity, that's really when the rubber hits the road, you know, and to where you need to look at that a little bit more.
So then just very high level, I'd love to understand more throughout this process of which zoning criteria or classifications that we're not using and why we're not using it, and if it needs to be fully removed or converted to be more user-friendly. Like I saw from your report, we don't have any, what was it, like entertainment districts. Is that because we are too restrictive so they can't actually be used? Do you want to encourage that more and find a way to encapsulate that in some future development? Or do we just sideline and go with something else that accomplishes the same goal? But just because it's not used currently, I'm hesitant to throw it out until I understand more about why and how it could be more effective with that.
So I would say for stuff like that, every city has that too, and I think it's honestly probably all three of the above of what you said. A, it's not a very big district. Maybe it was super specific on where it would be allowed, so therefore you only have like 1 or 2 parcels that are doing it. B, you know, it's a use that's allowed in multiple categories, so then entertainment just didn't get picked up. And then C, maybe it's really like, do we need to have, you know, umpteen number of zoning districts if it really is being handled in a different direction. So that would be where I think we can ask for some more of that, but I would say that isn't the goal of more of, if this is a use that you want, really start thinking about where you think that would be appropriate, and then when we start drafting the code, making sure that that's something that's captured, you know, to be where you would want it to be, versus why we don't have it now. So, for example, we have zoning districts that we kept, and we added new zoning districts, and we were like, ooh, that's gonna be hard to really kind of address with that old stuff, so we'll just have a new set. And then we're like, ooh, we really kind of want to add these new things, but we don't want to address this old stuff, so we'll layer the cake again. So I do think there's an opportunity in this to maybe deconstruct some of those cake layers, you know, and have more of a holistic approach versus just slapping another layer on there, you know, of kind of confusion. So the reason why you have that traditionally in just cities everywhere is you're trying to fit a specific need for maybe a specific item, and it didn't fit, you know, which is kind of where PUDs come in sometimes, you know, but for whatever reason here, we added this entertainment zoning district. Yeah, which, I mean, that's why you really should look at code rewrites. The comp plan really kind of set that foundation, I think, for us to go, and why council and management really thought of this as a good opportunity to do this. And as a growing city, you know, let's take this opportunity to build it in, you know. It's an exciting process for us, for sure.
Your entertainment zoning district, for example, the reason it's not used is because the uses that people would use that for are also allowed in the retail and service district. And so, all things being equal, developer prefers the zoning district that has that plus some additional flexibility for other uses.
Would love to understand how we can incentivize development for local businesses. I mean, we certainly need to have chain stores and they need to exist, but are there ways that we can encourage a more diversity of different sizes of businesses and encourage young entrepreneurs to get into the workforce, those kinds of things too?
Yeah.
And then also encourage mixed use between recreation, retail, food and drink. I've heard a lot of public comment about that over the years. And is there a way that we can allow those things to thrive together and be designed in a way that it complements each other?
Yeah.
But I'll leave it there.
I like it.
Any other feedback at this point about the discussion topics or anything else?
Just a comment, let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I like it.
All right, well, we will have some additional public efforts with this going forward, of course. Those will, come along the way, the drafting process. You may also see some one-off things that maybe get brought up by staff where we're partway through drafting, and before we start drafting a certain piece, we actually want to throw an idea in front of you. So it could be like a short item just to say like, hey, we're thinking about this. Do you think we're crazy or not? And some things like that along the way. So again, we're kind of in this process. We did build in some schedule flex to this. We thought that was going to end up getting flexed into the diagnostic report. We were right. Spent a little extra time making sure that we're paying attention to what all your codes say now, but otherwise, we're still on schedule to roll with this. We've actually kind of started working on some of the first module language where we start setting up the document itself. We also usually go through a process of simply reorganizing what you have. Your code's a little bit more complicated on that topic because you are not in a unified code environment now. So we can't just toss it all in there and say good luck. So we're looking at how we want to start presenting these pieces to you so that it's digestible, you feel comfortable, where you can go into the weeds but not feel overwhelmed by it. That's our game plan going forward. So that's all I have this evening. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share, Melissa or Commission?
No, I really appreciate you guys doing this with us. We're excited.
It's a good experience, and thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jason's going to update you on Sahara.
It's a great point.
All right, I'm sure a couple of y'all watched the council meeting on Project Sahara. So on Tuesday, October 21st, that was our second reading for the proposed PUD. As you saw, there was 7 or 8 other items that are associated with that development. So council did add the requirement for, or some of the PUD changes that maybe y'all did not see was a requirement for minimum percentage of townhomes. I know that was some discussion here. So they're doing minimum of 20% with a maximum of 30, so a little bit of flexibility. They will be developed in phase 1 and or phase 2. Council did request to move the construction of the covered sports courts to phase 1 versus phase 2. And then one that kind of went against y'all's recommendation was the administrative approval for CUP. So that will still be a staff level function like some of the more recent PUDs that we've done. But if there's any conflict or staff doesn't kind of agree or we just see something that maybe it meets the language but not the intent, we may push that up to you guys for kind of a third-party review of that. So that was the major changes. So that's all I have for you tonight.
Okay. Does anyone in the commission have questions about that? I guess you did a good job. Thank you.
Y'all did a good job. Y'all vetted it.
No, thank you.
We tried.
One name change too.
Yeah. I didn't think it was called Sahara anymore.
City Point. It'll have 5 names by the time it's done, by the way. I know. Well, when the actual home builder comes, they'll probably rename it too. Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. That's how it was introduced to me, so that's how it will be forever known.
Us too. It's fine. Just call it Sahara. All right, gang. Well, with that, we have covered everything that's on our agenda, so there's no other business that we're able to discuss tonight, and we are going to be adjourned at 8:33.